Today, we are talking about a figure in the sport of NASCAR who lived life to the fullest in all ways he could, both on and off the racetrack. Today, we are talking about the legacy of Benny Parsons, a man who, as the title suggests in this video, had a very complete career. Parsons was born in the midst of World War II on July 12, 1941 in Wilkes County, North Carolina, growing up in the midst of racing country. Parsons spent the majority of his youth in the area of the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where he attended and played football for Millers Creek High School, known today as West Wilkes High School. Following high school, he moved to Detroit, Michigan, where he first became a professional driver, but not in the way you may think. His father operated a taxi company in Detroit, and during this time, Benny worked at a gas station and also drove taxi cabs in Detroit for his father's company. One day, while working at the gas station, a group of customers were towing a race car, and they invited Parsons to go to the local track where they were going. As fate would have it, the driver of the car mysteriously never showed up for the race, and Benny Parsons, the taxi driver, became a race car driver as he stepped up to race the new friend's car for the first time ever. It sounds like a story straight out of a movie, and maybe that's because Benny Parsons' spirit and story is worthy of a movie, because after that, a NASCAR legacy was before us all. Parsons would later begin his NASCAR career by running an additional entry at Asheville-Weaverville Speedway in 1964 for Holman Moody Racing, who also fielded a car of Cale Yarborough. Parsons would finish 21st after qualifying 9th in his NASCAR Cup Series debut, and overall it wasn't a bad debut, but it was best for Parsons to take time developing more, where he spent time within the ranks of ARCA, where he'd won the championships in 1968 and 1969. At this point in his life, Parsons moved to Ellerbe, North Carolina, the town in which he would later call home for the rest of his life. In 1969, Parsons would make 4 starts for car owner Russ Dawson, getting 3 top 10s in these 4 starts, and 2 of those were top 5 finishes, finishing a then career high 3rd place at Texas World Speedway. In 1970, Benny began racing full-time in the Grand National Series for DeWitt Racing 72 car, and in this time, he would start 45 of the then 48 race season, and Parsons would score 23 top 10s, 12 top 5s in his first full season at this level, and in the final race of the 1970 season, he would pick up the pole award at Langley Speedway, leading for 46 laps, and he would finish a new career high 2nd place in that final race of 1970, gaining some much needed momentum for the future. I say that the momentum was much needed because, well, while his stats sound fantastic for that season, and he actually did finish 8th place in the point standings, he and the 72 car, when they weren't doing well, they probably didn't finish, as Parsons had 21 DNFs during 1970. Parsons would return once again with DeWitt Racing's 72 team in 1971, but they would not run as many races, only competing in 35 events of the 48 race season. However, even with that, there was a great positive here. His stats remained about even, if not a little better. 18 top 10s with 13 top 5s, which is an improved top 5 to top 10 ratio from the previous year. However, Parsons did have 17 DNFs, which is down from the 21 the previous year, but you have to consider running 35 races versus 45 the previous year. Well, that's actually a higher percentage of races that were DNFs from 1970. But the biggest reason I count 1971 as a better season than 1970 for Parsons is because he was a NASCAR Grand National winner now. Parsons would go to victory lane for the first time ever at 1971 at South Boston Speedway in what was then NASCAR's Cup Series. Parsons would finish the year 11th in standings, and little did they know at that time, but things were about to get much better for DeWitt Racing. Now, in previous years of NASCAR, the top series ran anywhere from nearly 50 to well over 60 races a year, but in 1972, NASCAR reduced this number significantly, and a lot of this, maybe you can thank Richard Petty for. Most car owners like DeWitt's couldn't afford to do as many races as an organization like the Pettys could. He certainly had some who could, do not get me wrong, but as far as competition was concerned, this was a move that could help the sport, and in the case of Parsons and the 72 team, it did. NASCAR's top series ran just 31 races in 1972, and for the first time, DeWitt Racing was able to run a full season of Parsons behind the wheel of the 72 car, and this brought on greater results for the team. While Parsons did not win in 1972, he did record 19 top 10s and 10 top 5s, which in relation to the number of races ran that year was a significantly higher percentage improvement, resulting in a 5th place finish for Benny Parsons. Now, 1973, an interesting season. Parsons won just one race that year at Bristol. David Pearson won 11 races that season, but David Pearson was a well-known trophy hunter in terms of his NASCAR career. Never really made a run too much at a full season. If he did, he perhaps could have been greater than Richard Petty as far as championships and wins, but that was never really David Pearson's thing. David Pearson only ran 18 races in 1973. Looking at this, holy cow, Pearson won 61% of the races he entered that season. If he had ran the full 28 race season in 1973, holding that same average, he could have maybe won 17 races in 1973. But because he did not run full time, his points almost were meaningless as Pearson finished 13th in the standings. Benny Parsons, with 1 win, 21 top 10s, and 15 top 5s, would win the 1973 Cup Series Championship 67 points ahead of Cale Yarborough, and quite possibly one of the more unique championships in history looking at it from a stats perspective. But not looking at it this way, Parsons becoming champion is nothing short of a miracle. Parsons had been very consistent all year long, but in the final races of the year at Rockingham, things very nearly fell apart for Parsons. His championship hopes appeared to be fading away when he was involved in a crash on just lap 13 in that race, and his car was very much damaged heavily after this. In the pits, the team attempted to achieve whatever they could out of the car and hoped for a top 5 finish in the final standings. However, the rest of the garage was hoping to see the underdog team beat Richard Petty, and nearly everyone from all teams that could join in agreed to help join in and help Parsons' team get the car back on the track. Miraculously, Parsons got back out there 136 laps later and completed enough laps to finish 25th and take the 1973 championship, but not without some luck from Petty's misfortune. With the championship within his grasp, which could have possibly been Richard Petty's 8th championship, after earning the pole award at that race and seeing Parsons' accident, Petty ended up having engine troubles and would have to settle for a 35th place finish in that race. The poor end for Petty's day actually dropped Petty to 5th in the final standings, as Cale Yarborough took the runner-up spot of the season with his 3rd place finish at Rockingham, 67 points behind the champion, Benny Parsons. I said it earlier and I will say it again, you could not have wrote out a better NASCAR career storyline than Benny Parsons, going from taxi driver to NASCAR Cup Series champion, and a dramatic way of winning his championship just makes his story even better. And on top of this, at that time, he was the only driver to win an ARCA championship and a NASCAR Cup Series championship. Parsons would race for DeWitt Racing for 5 more seasons until 1978, and in 1979 he would go over to MC Anderson's 27 car where he'd race for 2 seasons. Between 1974 to 1980, Parsons would score 15 more victories across NASCAR's top series, and he would finish anywhere from 5th to 3rd in the point standings during this time, which, while he may not have won another championship, he was still one of the most consistent racers of his time period. In 1975, while racing for DeWitt, Parsons would add his name to the list of winners in the Great American Race by winning the Daytona 500 that season. In 1981, Parsons made the switch to the number 15 Ford owned by Bud Moore. That season, he picked up wins at the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, Richmond, and he would win the final race held at Texas World Speedway. This would be his last multi-win season, but it would not be his last win. While he did record 3 wins, this was a down year for Parsons as he finished 10th in the standings, but as fate would have it for his driving career, this would be the beginning of the end, as it was his last time finishing in the top 10 in the point standings. After 1981, the starts became fewer and far between for Parsons, driving in only 23 races in 1982 for a variety of owners, but one of the highlights of that time period did come at Talladega Superspeedway, when Parsons became the first driver in NASCAR history to record a qualifying speed of more than 200 miles per hour with a speed of 200.175 miles per hour. While Bill Elliott would eventually beat this record, it was certainly impressive at that time. After running on a reduced schedule in 1982, the same can be said from 1983 to 1986 as Parsons was racing part-time for Johnny Hayes' race team. During that run, Parsons would score his 21st and final victory in the Coca-Cola 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and he'd also make a special cameo appearance in the movie Stroker Ace starring Burt Reynolds in 1983. Then in 1987, a unique situation came up for Benny Parsons. While he would eventually make a return for his final 8 races of his career, where he'd pick up his final 2 wins in his first 2 starts of the season, Tim Richmond was temporarily sidelined from racing action with Hendrick Motorsports while battling with AIDS, which of course was a much more deadly disease back in the 1980s. And sadly, after 1987, Richmond would not return to NASCAR, succumbing to his illness in 1989. During the time that Tim was out in 1987, Benny Parsons was hired by Hendrick Motorsports as a substitute driver, and Parsons did not drive Richmond's number 25, he drove the number 35 Folgers Chevy instead, while Richmond drove the 25 in the races that he started in the middle of the season. Paired with crew chief Harry Hyde, Parsons helped inspire quite a few moments from the hit movie Days of Thunder during his ride with Hendrick. Harry Hyde was also admittedly the key person who inspired the character of Harry Hodge, the crew chief for Cole Trickle, portrayed by Robert Duvall. A couple of moments from Parsons in 1987 you may recognize from Days of Thunder. In the first lap of the race at Darlington Raceway, Parsons hit the wall and damaged his race car very heavily. While he was able to continue racing, his car would need to come into the pit several times to keep it afloat. At one time in the race, Parsons wanted to come in, but Harry Hyde refused to allow Parsons to pit because he and the rest of the crew were having a break for ice cream. I'm sure this sounds plenty familiar if you know the movie, and so should this if you get the significance of that last moment. While racing at Martinsville Speedway after having a day where it seemed like Parsons couldn't seem to stay out of trouble, Harry Hyde sarcastically suggested Parsons should hit the pace car on the restart because it was the only thing that Parsons appeared to have not hit that day. Again, both were real-life moments from Benny Parsons' time with Hendrick, and both moments became iconic moments in Days of Thunder. I said it before and I can say it again here, if it seems like the life of Benny Parsons could make a great movie, then that's for good reason, as these two moments became crucial moments of an iconic movie about NASCAR. But like all great movies, life comes in chapters, and for Parsons after that run of Hendrick, one chapter was closing and another was about to begin. Driving number 90 Bullseye Barbecue Ford for Don Levy Racing, Parsons would run his final NASCAR season in 1988, picking up just one top 10 finish in the second to last race of the season at Phoenix. When it was all said and done as a driver, Parsons raced in 526 cup races, winning 21 times with 199 top 5s and 283 top 10s, with 20 races starting on the pole, and he led a total of 6,866 laps. In 1998, Benny Parsons was named in the list of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers ever, and it was for good reason. The former taxi driver held his own in NASCAR, and his career is one that anyone could be happy to have. As for what happened next, Parsons went from the driver's seat to the headset, transitioning in the world of NASCAR broadcasting, where he would become one of the most iconic voices of the peak era of NASCAR racing in the 1990s and 2000s. This transition seemed to come with ease, as he had already been working as a pit reporter for both ESPN and TBS while also racing part-time shortly before his driving retirement. Upon his permanent retirement from racing, his career began as a true race broadcaster, first with ESPN, and then by 2001 when the TV rights for NASCAR were redone, ESPN's days of broadcasting NASCAR were done for the foreseeable future, and Benny Parsons was brought in as a lead commentator for NBC and TNT. Parsons' voice covering the sport won him many awards and praises, including an ESPN Emmy Award in 1996 and the Ace Award in 1989. In addition to his time on screen, Parsons' voice also became famous to many NASCAR fans over the years, as he held his own on radio too, co-hosting coverage of Cup Series qualifying through North Carolina radio station WFMX with Mark Garrow in the early 1990s. He also co-hosted a NASCAR and motorsports radio program called Fast Talk on PRN, the Performance Racing Network, alongside Doug Rice, and this was a show that he did all the way until his death. On top of that, his cameo appearances as a broadcaster host a long list as well, especially in video games. He appeared in NASCAR 99, NASCAR 2000, and NASCAR 2001 as a commentator, as well as being an unlockable legend in the games, except for NASCAR 2001, where he was only featured as an in-game announcer. He also made an appearance in NASCAR Rumble as a legend in that game, in addition to NASCAR Thunders 2002, 2003, and 2004 as an unlockable driver in the game. And Parsons also helped feature those EA Sports game titles on NBC and TNT in the EA Sports Thunder Motion, where viewers were took on a virtual ride of each track utilizing the game and Parsons' unique commentary and perspective. Outside of video games, while he made a cameo in his driving days in Stroker Ace and helped inspire scenes in Days of Thunder as a driver, he also made cameo appearances as a NASCAR commentator, portraying himself in Herbie Fully Loaded in 2005 and also appearing briefly in 2006's Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. Parsons, in all senses of the meaning, lived his career to the fullest, getting the most out of everything throughout the entirety of his life. And sadly, even still at the peak of his broadcasting career, at the age of 65, this chapter of his broadcasting career came to a tragic end in addition to his life. While Benny Parsons was able to give up smoking in 1978, it did not prevent future long-term effects, unfortunately. In the summer of 2006, after experiencing breathing difficulties, Parsons was diagnosed with lung cancer, and thus he'd have to step aside from broadcasting, but he did later announce that the treatment had been completed successfully and that he held a clean bill of health. Unfortunately though, his health even had prevented him from attending a ceremony in November 2006 where he was to be presented with the Myers Brothers Award honoring his contributions to racing. Christmas 2006 was a somber time for the Parsons family. On December 26, 2006, he was readmitted into the hospital and placed in intensive care due to complications with his lung cancer. And then on January 16, 2007, Parsons would sadly pass away from complications of lung cancer treatment in the ICU at the Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Today, he is buried near his childhood home in Purlear, North Carolina, which is now the site of the Benny Parsons Rendezvous Ridge, which is also the residence of his widow, Terry Parsons, in addition to also being home to a racing museum and winery. While it's sad to no longer have Benny in the lives of those he loved and loved him in and out of the NASCAR garage area, his legacy is certainly one to never forget and honor forever, in which his memory has been honored forever by NASCAR and those around it. In 1994, Benny Parsons was inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, as well as the Court of Legends at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the same year. In 2005, he was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America, and then he was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2017. Benny Parsons' memory will live on forever, as it was indeed a very complete career in all aspects, and while he may be gone, the Parsons name in NASCAR is not. Phil Parsons, the younger brother of Benny, also held his own in the ranks of NASCAR as a driver and has serviced as a solid commentator as well for Fox Sports. And Phil's son, Benny's nephew, Stephen Parsons, is now developing in his own rights as a racer in the NASCAR Xfinity Series 2. So now, after this look back at one of the greats of NASCAR, what did you think of Benny Parsons' legacy in NASCAR? Did you watch him as a driver, or do you most remember him from television and video game appearances? It's always an interesting dynamic with the diverse age group of YouTube viewers and how they knew the legends in the sport. What were your favorite moments from Benny Parsons? Leave all your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like on the video, and if you are new to my channel, then please be sure to hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts for when I post next. As always, thanks again to my Danny B superfans. Your monthly donation as a member of the channel does not go without gratitude, and I do appreciate the monthly support from you. Also, speaking of support, we are still continuing to raise money for the Red Cross's efforts in tornado relief, and we will be until February 28, 2022. While we may not hit the goal of $50,000 raised by then, we could if everyone would donate only $3, and as of now, we have been able to raise $251.48. So if you are able to, then I do invite you to consider donating. I get nothing from your donation, and neither does YouTube. In fact, YouTube actually handles 100% of the processing fees, and the money raised goes directly to the United States Red Cross. So, with that being said, I just want to thank you again for taking time to watch today's video, and until next time, I hope you have a great day. Bye guys. Hey race fans, thanks for watching this video from DannyBTalks. If you're new to my channel, please be sure to hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss another video from my channel.